All right, it's been a few weeks. It is a new year. We are 7-6 coming off a successful 2024 campaign. I am so excited to be back with conversations with Commodores, and we've got one of the bigger successful linemen that we've had in many, many years. Of course. Let's see, he wore numbers 66 and 69, 74. What other numbers did you wear, Will, during your years? Any other
And that was
numbers?
about it. In high school, I wore 74, carried that to Vanderbilt, and was trying to carry that to Arizona, but DJ Humphreys had that, so I ended up with 69.
Very good. Well, guys, of course, 2012 to 2016, he was number 74. He was an anchor on our offensive line for many, many years. It set records while they were in offense. Of course, we've got Will Holden with us this evening. Good evening. Happy New Year. And I'm sorry I butchered that introduction, Will, but it's so good to see you, bud.
No, no, thanks for having me on. Happy New Year to you too. It's always a good time to take a break during the holidays, but it's always so much better. I feel like coming out of it into a fresh new year. So excited to join you.
Oh, we've been off the last 2 weeks from the show, and when Tuesdays roll around, I'm such a creature of habit. I'm ready to have the next conversation. So I'm glad that you're my kickoff inaugural one for this year. And just as a side note, guys, we've got Commodores lined up, gosh, all the way into March right now. So please keep coming back on Tuesday nights. But Will, you I got to start here. Did you play lineman your whole football career on the offense? Did you ever play defense?
In high school, I dabbled in a little bit, but that was short lived after a concussion in high school. And my offensive line coach in high school, Jeff Nettles, saved my life because he wouldn't let me play high school basketball and he wouldn't let me play defense after I got my first offer. So I was strictly offensive tackle from there on out.
Well, I know I won't be the first, nor am I going to be the last, but did you find that your last name caused you any issues being an offensive lineman? Did
Definitely not the first on that
Holden
route.
say
Yeah,
again?
so I caught a lot of that heat as soon as I got to Vanderbilt, and it never really stopped. Right, I think you can go to Twitter and it's probably still there from my playing days in the NFL. But you know, one ear and out the other.
It has to have. Um, Not that there were many calls, if ever, on you, but I just was thinking, man, that's a name for an offensive lineman if I've ever heard one. Or we could have changed it maybe to Will Pancake, and that'd be a little bit better. Maybe that was a nickname that I don't know about yet. But
Yeah.
Will, how did you get out of the Jacksonville, Florida suburbs, if you will, and why not play at Georgia, Florida, Florida State, some of the bigger, more prominent and more successful, if you will, programs? How'd you end up at Vanderbilt?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, a little background on me. Grew up outside of Jacksonville, Florida. My dad spent 30 years in the U.S. Navy, and my mom, she worked at a local elementary school in our hometown. And everyone in the Southeast plays football. So that was kind of what I was destined to do. And, God blessed me with size and talent that could get me over the hump of actually being an athletic player. So I'm very thankful for that. And just like all my friends back home, and many people in the South, right? You play football. That's kind of our only option um, to go to college. Happened to be halfway decent, and during the recruiting process, man, what was my first offer? I think it was Southern Miss was my first offer, and this was before like Twitter had really started. Um, and they sent a letter to my house, and I opened it up. Hey, we're extending this offer for a full ride scholarship. So at that point, I knew, all right, I have a legit chance to go, get out of Jacksonville, Florida, which was a great place to grow up, but it just comes to a point where you need a new change of scenery. And after that, the ball kind of got rolling, and Bowling Green, USF, some smaller schools, and then West Virginia and Louisville came in. And then towards the end, Vanderbilt had reached out on my way back from a Louisville recruiting trip. And it was during, when was that? Was that 2010? It was during either right after the flood or there was a tornado in 2010.
Mm-hmm.
And we had been driving through Nashville. And James Franklin calls me, hey, we need you to stop by Vanderbilt. We heard you're on a recruiting trail. And at that point, this was like my 8th or 9th school that we had seen. I was telling my parents, I'm like, listen, like, I just need a break. And we actually ended up driving past Vanderbilt through Nashville, went back home to Jacksonville. And Ricky Ronnie and James Franklin called me again. I was like, hey, we're coming down to you this time. We're going to try to convince you to come to Nashville. So they showed up at my school. And at the end of the day, it kind of boiled down to those 3 things, right? And they still preach it today, right? You're in Nashville, one of the greatest cities in America. Obviously, I still live here, so I love it. Monday through Friday, right? You get to compete against the best students in America, a top 15 university.
Mm-hmm.
And then on Saturday, you get to play in the SEC against the best athletes. So you combine those 3 things. That recruiting pitch wasn't needed because I could see it. And I believed in James Franklin and what he was doing and turning around a program. And for me, I always wanted to build something. I didn't want to go be a part of something that was already great. And I believed in the mission, and that's why I came up here. But, you know, I grew up 45 minutes away from the University of Florida. Could have went there. Mm-hmm. Some people just need a new change of scenery, and that's kind of, you know, what drove me to Nashville.
Well, that was Florida's loss was certainly Vanderbilt's gain, but I want to back up just a little bit, Will. When did you hit your growth spurt, and when did you decide that football was going to be your post high school endeavor?
I've always been a big kid. Man, I maybe since I was like 10 years old, I've always been a big kid. There's a photo of me. I was actually a swimmer before this, and I played soccer. And my neighbor at the time is well known now, Caleb Dressel. He's like a 7-time gold medalist, a captain of the USA team. Him and I swam together in Jacksonville. But there's a photo of us of him standing next to me. And at that point, you know, I just couldn't swim anymore. I couldn't play soccer. I was just destined to put pads on and go hit people. So I've always been big. Thank goodness I've never been too big where I can't move. But I can't remember a time when I wasn't big.
When, you know, as when a kid hits a growth spurt when they're young and they're very tall and lanky and they don't quite have that coordination, at least I've referred to maybe like a deer on ice. When do you remember during your youth sports when you found your footing or you were able to develop? Because I know that one of the things that's not really spoken by the average fan is footwork and the importance of it for linemen. Because if you don't have good footwork, you're never, no matter how strong you are, you're not going to be able to do what you need to do to be successful. So when did you find that footing, if you will, that balance and the ability there?
Yeah, so I would say probably my sophomore year of high school. And I owe everything to my head football coach, Matt Toblin in high school, and Jeff Nettles, my offensive line coach. They came in and changed our program around night and day. No one had been getting recruited to schools. There wasn't a strength program. And they came in and implemented, I think it was what is it called? The BFS, the bigger, faster, stronger program. And that was my first taste of like an actual strict workout routine. And, you know, in high school, there's a lot of outside pressures from friends and things like that come in of, I'm a big kid, always have been a big kid. I think I was 240 my freshman year. And then my sophomore year, I got down to 218. And my head coach, he comes up to me and he's like, what, like during a workout, what are you doing? Like, why are you trying to get so skinny? You have the frame to change your life. And it was like that moment, I swear, I still remember where I was. We were outside of the weight room and we were doing single leg, like RDLs or something like that. And in between sets, he came over. He's like, what are you doing? I swear that night, like I went to the Winn-Dixie down the street from my house, got a loaf of bread, a tub of peanut butter and jelly, and a gallon of chocolate milk. And I drank that religiously for that year and ended up going from 218 to 265 my junior and senior year. But always maintaining that foot speed, always maintaining that strength level. That, you know, I was never the strongest, but I could get by with my strength and my leverage and my bend, and that was kind of what set me apart. You know, foot speed and then bend, which was a huge part of it.
You know, when we reflect back as we get older, we think about those days, certain times of our life that really stand out. Some of your decision making, some of the people who influence you, the day you get married, the day you have your children, those kind of things. And I'm not saying that that conversation is on the same level as getting married or having children, but for you to remember where you were and who it was involving and what it was about and how it impacted you, that has to be one of those, I'm going to call it a top tier day that really is pivotal in your life. Am
Yeah,
I
for sure.
overstating it, or does that sound?
No, that's accurate. And I don't think there is an understatement in that, because I ended up coming to Vanderbilt and meeting my wife freshman move-in day. So,
There we go.
um, yeah, so it was a pivotal moment in my life. And at that point, you know, 17 years old to understand that, 16 years old to understand what was going on and the weight of that situation to kind of, you know, open up so many possibilities and so many doors. Yeah, I still think about that, and obviously still, you know, keep in touch with them because they helped me change the rest of my life.
Yeah, I'm still in touch with my high school coach, and it's amazing the impact that our youth coaches have on us. But Will, you make the decision to come up to Vanderbilt. Franklin, clearly, Coach Franklin is a persuasive recruiter and coach and a motivator of men. But prior to hearing from Coach Franklin and the recruiting coaches, had Vanderbilt really ever been on your radar? Did you even know that it was an SEC school? Did you know anything about the sports history? Or was it just another school that you just kind of bypassed when you were looking at the annual books that came out?
Yeah, so this is probably very naive of me when I was this young, but obviously the NCAA video game was huge.
Mhm.
And I knew Vanderbilt had a reputation of being like, you know, 2-10 every single year.
Mhm.
Um, and I knew that it was a fun school to be a part of. Had no idea that academics were as rigorous as they would be. Um, but like you said, James Franklin is a great recruiter. And obviously at 18 years old, I don't think I knew what that degree would do for me, what playing in the SEC would do for me, and being in Nashville would do for me. But I think it was the best decision. You know, would I go back and play another 4 or 5 years of college football? Absolutely not. But I enjoyed my time in Nashville, and I still, you know, bleed black and gold. I took my son to, I think, every home game this season. He's going to bleed black and gold, believe it or not. He doesn't have a real choice. And he, you know, he loves to say, go Vanderbilt at any football game that's on the TV because he has no idea who's playing. So I just encourage him to do it. And it's, it's my home, right? And it's kind of what made me grow into the man I am today. So I owe everything to Vanderbilt.
Let's talk about that welcome to the SEC moment for you. You get to campus in the fall of 12. Franklin is your head coach. Did you live, or excuse me, did you have a roommate that fall?
I did. Blake Frommang, who was on this show a little while back, him and I were freshman roommates.
And Blake's already popped in and out on the show. I'm not sure if he's with us right this minute, but he's
Okay.
also doing some good things on social media these days. But I want to talk about Blake, or I want you to talk about Blake for just a minute. Did you guys hit it off instantly as friends? Did you have some? I'm not sure
Yeah,
about
this
this
is great.
dude moments or what. Talk about that because getting used to, you
Yeah.
go from being a big fish in a little pond in Clay, Florida, and now everybody is in the same boat, so to speak, when they get to Vanderbilt.
Yeah. So this is great. So Blake and I, we were both from Florida. He was from Lake Highland Prep down in Orlando, and obviously me from Clay High School out in Jacksonville. So during the whole recruiting process, He had reached out to me. He's like, "Hey, man, we need to get you to commit." Blah blah blah. So we hit it off right off the bat, and I would go down to Orlando, hang with him. I remember we were at oh man, was it a Buffalo Wild Wings or a Hurricane Wings or whatever they have down in Florida. Him and I, we went through like 50 wings like it was nothing. And from that moment on, we're like, yeah, we got to be roommates. And then quickly found out that probably shouldn't be roommates. But there's always times where you have to kind of get over those hurdles, and some people just aren't compatible to live with each other. And we found that out, and we laugh about it today. But still good friends, and we keep in touch. But some people just shouldn't live together, and we found that out.
It probably saved your friendship by not living together later on.
Exactly. But I mean, he was pivotal in kind of helping get me over the hump to come to Vanderbilt in terms of building our recruiting class out. Right, we had 5 or 6 offensive linemen. It was me, Blake out of Lake Highland, obviously Andrew out of Henry County, Barrett Gallagher out of Baylor, Kevin McCoy out of Armwood, another Florida guy, and then Adam Butler out of Duncanville. And it kind of goes back to that whole belief thing of James Franklin said, "Hey, like we're going to change this program around." To go out and sign 5, 6 offensive linemen in a class was huge, right? This is before NIL, so we believed that we could all develop together. And Blake was a big part of kind of projecting that to us.
And speaking of Adam Butler, what is he in his 9th year, 10th year? No, not 10th.
I think so. He was my year. So was I 17?
So 7th year.
Yeah. So what would this?
He had a sack this weekend.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah, 7 or 8. Best thing for him was to go from playing center to defensive tackle.
Yeah. And he's been harassing offensive linemen for several years.
Yeah.
Will you the season before your senior year, 2011 season, Vanderbilt goes 6-7 other than Franklin, lose in the Liberty Bowl, but it's very promising given it was 2-10 and 2-10 the 2 seasons before that. Your first season is one of the best seasons, frankly, in the last 50, 60 years of Vanderbilt football. You guys go 9-4, you win the Music City Bowl. And I want you to talk about that a little bit, your transition. And that's I may have interrupted myself about welcome to the SEC moment, but talk about the speed of the game and the strength of you getting used to all of that compared to what you had just been doing in high school. It's a big contrast.
Yeah. So to go back to the welcome to the SEC moment, and speaking of Blake, I think he touched on this too. I think we were on field goal right next to each other against South Carolina. And I think he talked about Jadeveon Clowney on field goal. So that was like our first welcome to the SEC moment.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, oh gosh, coming in, believing in a program that went, 6-7, and then we go 9-4. I think it kind of we weren't the most talented recruits, right? We were still 2 stars, 3 stars. I think we had maybe 1 or 2 4 stars that came in our class. But something that James Franklin, I think, preached was like, no one's going to outwork us, right? We believe in ourselves, and that's all that matters. It's everyone in this huddle. Some of the hardest workouts, those winter workouts, I've heard people on your show talk about them. Like, I think my freshman year, well, I don't think, I know, I had walking pneumonia for like 2 months during winter workouts and after. And I was coughing up some blood, and my wife, girlfriend at the time, Casey, she's like, "You need to go to student health. Like, this is not normal." But for me, that was just a part of, no one's going to outwork us. We're the toughest people around. I'm just going to keep going through it. And obviously everything, turned out fine and got everything fixed up. But we had that belief, and I think that's kind of what got us over the hurdle when we walked into opposing, stadiums. When we went to the University of Georgia, when we went to, whatever it might be, Mizzou, and we came out, victorious. We knew that going in, and I think you see a lot of that now in today's team. So I think there's a lot of translation, and I'm hoping and praying that, it turns back into that, because when we have these conversations, and you say, this is the winningest class at Vanderbilt, or this is the last 50, 60 years where they've been that great. Like, I'm very much ready as a Vanderbilt fan for that to be over with. So
Yeah.
we don't have to talk about that. Where we can talk about now, today, Clark Lee and those guys in team 4 and 5 and 6 and 7 and whatever that might be looking forward, kind of, brings to the table.
You really just led me into one of my topics for tonight, is the mentality of the current team, the team 4 that had such a historic season and some quite memorable and historic wins that we all know of now. That not so quiet confidence, it's out there. Diego brings it out. I've never seen a player, never met another player, never watched another player with as much inner desire to not just be the best for himself, but he just brings it to the sidelines and in the locker room. So here's my question. Did you have one single player, or was it a group mentality that demonstrated that same attitude, if you will, that allowed you guys to have back-to-back 9-4 seasons? Is there a correlation there between the 24 team and the 12 and 13 teams?
Yeah. So when I was, there in 12 and 13, I was still a young player. However, I think James Franklin did a good job of making sure that no one person was ahead of the rest. And I know Diego is super passionate and a fireball out there and displays it well, but I truly believe that he's not the only one, right? He's the quarterback, so he is the anchor of that team. But good teams are surrounded by good people, and everyone has that same mindset, and they're building that culture. So I truly believe, just like 12 and 13, it's a locker room effort, and that's kind of what's propelling them forward. You do need someone to kind of gather the troops, but once there's one person believing, then 2 people start believing, then 5 people, then 10, then the sky's the limit. I know the season just ended, but I'm kind of already ramped up and ready to go for Team 5.
You and me both. Absolutely. I was in Birmingham, here, obviously here in town at the Birmingham Bowl. I didn't want the game to end. I mean, I wanted to get the W, of course, but I want more. I want more. I'm ready for spring ball. I'm ready for us to kick off at Virginia Tech in the fall. And we're going to get back to your story in just a minute, because Casey's, who's just joined us, is tired of hearing about the 2024 season. But it just has created this synergy, this renewed optimism, if you will, and energy in the program that we haven't seen in a long, long time. So for that, I'm very thankful. But I want to go back to your freshman and sophomore years. You guys go 18 and 8 those 2 seasons. And I dare say no freshman class has started out 18 and 8 their first 2 years, maybe ever in program's history. So you get finished, and I'm not trying to speed through any of this, Will, but where I want to put you is the end of your sophomore season. You guys beat, I want to say, was that yeah, you were here in Birmingham. That was against Houston. That was a big win over at the Old Gray Lady at Legion Field. What a terrible stadium.
Horrible.
Old nasty. But anyway, was there the expectation before Coach Franklin left for Penn State? That's where I want to take you. Before you find out that he's gone or going to Penn State, what was that, if you remember, what was that mindset about the junior year, your 3rd year? Because I know you guys were about to lose a bunch of talent, but do you remember that time period, that post-sophomore time period, post-sophomore season time period?
Yeah. Man, that's going on over
10 years
ago at this point.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, briefly, again, this is, Twitter is just starting to kind of be used as a tool to announce,
Yeah. Yeah.
new gigs for head coaches and things like that. So we had heard some rumblings, but I
Mhm.
think everyone was so focused on, all right, we were top 25, like let's push it forward now. Like we truly believe that we could turn this program around, right? The stadium, we had sold out the games, and it wasn't just Tennessee fans and Georgia fans in the stands, right? We had legit support not only from the university and its fans, but Nashville as a whole. And that was the first time in, I think forever, really, since the 1920s. Um, so we had a lot of excitement. And then, you know, no blame to him. James Franklin, he's a Pennsylvania guy. He's trying to do the best he can to provide for his family and to elevate his career, right? And as an 18-year-old kid, like I don't understand that. 19 years old at that point, I don't understand that. But now I look back and I'm like, yeah, I probably would have done the same thing too, right? You have a great season back to back, you win a bowl game, and your name's all over ESPN. Like you might as well go take your dream job, right?
That's what I was going to say. I've always been under the belief that Penn State was his ultimate job.
Yeah, I mean, only he knows what his ultimate job is, right? But
Right.
it only
Right.
makes sense. And for someone who bought into a program that we were going to change things around and we had momentum and we were winning, and to be deflated like that as a 19-year-old kid, yeah, you're disappointed, because at that point I believed in the message that we are a family and we are going to the top of this mountain together.
Mhm.
um, but that's not always the case, and no fault to anybody, right? But it was deflating going into it, and then the whole head coach search after that of finding Derek Mason, we just
Mhm.
didn't know what was going to happen, and we were in limbo. Are we going to keep this mentality? Half of our recruiting class went to Penn State, which, again, right, no fault to them. If you've got Vanderbilt recruiting you, and then you've got Penn State who is competing obviously for national championships, like
Yeah.
it makes sense. I think was it Trace McSorley was in the recruiting
He
class, yeah,
was. He sure was.
and so yeah, I don't understand the weight of all that, then, but now you see it and you don't blame anyone for it because,
Uh, I was going to say,
it's just a part of it.
as a 19-year-old, I don't think you're probably the immediate emotion is being upset, to be a little deflated. Had Casey and you considered transferring?
Yeah,
You know,
so we
that's
did.
your coach.
Yeah, so I did. So this didn't happen till later though. So I this was the end of my fourth. So my fifth year, my redshirt senior year, I was going to transfer to Georgia. My wife had taken a job in Atlanta at Deloitte doing some consulting. And one of my good friends at the time, John Diaz, he was a 5-star tackle out of bowls. He was at Georgia. He had put me in touch with their coaches, and I remember printing out the transfer like paper. And as a grad transfer, I think you didn't have to wait out a year. I don't remember the exact rules,
Mhm.
but I remember filling it out and having it in front of us. And we were in the lobby of her dorm, like the communal area.
Mhm.
And I was like, all right, I'm gonna do it. And then literally the next morning, Mark Richt's like, I'm leaving, I'm going to Miami. So I was like, well, I guess I'm not going to Georgia anymore. And then I stuck around, and it worked out, obviously. But these things you don't think of. You just kind of go with the flow at that moment, and you think you're going to do what's best for you. And I'm very glad I didn't go there
Mhm.
because this changed my life, honestly.
Well, that's in your fifth year, but Franklin leaves after your second year, second season. Had you considered transferring at that point, or you were black and gold through and through at that point?
Yeah, I think we had built such a strong locker room culture with the guys around us. I don't
Mhm.
think anyone questioned leaving. It's not like today where you can just leave any minute. You had to wait. You had to wait a year, and
Yeah.
it just didn't make sense for anyone. Um, and honestly, we have been pushed so hard with James Franklin. Obviously we won a lot, but for a second we could take a breath and be like, oh, let's enjoy, what college football and what going to college is all about. So I never had any, thoughts to leave Vanderbilt after that. Was I disappointed? Yeah, because I thought we could, I really thought that we could be the best in the country. And, I still believe that for Vanderbilt.
Well, you go from James Franklin to Derek Mason, who I don't believe had been a head coach. I think he had been a defensive coordinator, was his highest title. They're very different personalities. They're very different coaching styles. What was it like, the transition going from one coach with that style of Franklin to an untested head coach in Coach Mason?
Yeah, I think at this point, right, I had gone from like playing a little bit to really solidifying like my starting role. Man, who was our offensive line coach that came in with him? Kevin Leitner came in with him. Um, and he gave me my first opportunity to actually start, like be a bona fide starter
Mhm.
at tackle, at right tackle. Um, so for me, this was a great opportunity to buy into the new regime.
Mhm.
Obviously, like you said, it's a very different culture, and you see it all the time in college football. When a new head coach comes in, they're going to bring their guys. But my mentality was, I knew this, and I wasn't going to let anyone who came in kind of change that or change my position as a starter. Um, so it was more internal for me to kind of understand, like, all right, I need to like really buckle down and kind of own my role here. And I'm not going to let, one regime kind of uproot me. And yeah, like you said, right, very different coaching personalities. Do you ever mesh well with any coach? Probably not, right? As a player, but you find your good, and you find your bad, and it. I wouldn't change anything in my story at Vanderbilt, right? Head coaching changes, wins, losses, injuries, no injuries, starting, not starting, right? It put me here today, so I can't change any of that.
Well, we're all a product of our experiences, of course, but it's admirable for the guys from your recruiting class and the class after you, 12 and 13. Mason comes in, you guys fall to 3 wins. Your fourth year, 4 wins. Then your final season in 2016, you get back up to 6 wins and make a bowl game. And I'm not so sure there's any recruiting class that can say that they played in 3 bowl games in 5 years. And that's an accomplishment for any program, but particularly our program. And we can touch on any of this that you want, but my question really is, reflecting back on your 5 years to see what you were able to accomplish with two different head coaches. I don't know how many offensive line coaches or offensive schemes you had to change to. It just shows your ability to adapt and to change as an athlete. And that had to have made an impact on your ability to make it in the pros as many years as you did.
Yeah, definitely. I think it still goes back to the guys in that locker room, right? And
Mhm.
and you asked earlier, right? Did you think about transferring? I don't think any of those guys thought about transferring because we had built such a strong culture under Franklin,
Mhm.
and we knew we could win. We've done it. We've shown it, right? In 12 and 13. Yes, there's going to be a dip when you come in, and there's some things, outside of our control that were, were, how do I say this? There are some things that just we couldn't control, and we did the best we could, and
Right.
we knew we could get over the hump. And I think that's what our senior year showed is like this recruiting class came here to be great. There are some things outside of our control, and we still ended very strong. And we put Vanderbilt in a good position when we left.
Well, also look at this, and I'm going to ask you, for who were some of the linemen who you played the most games with that helped Ralph Webb and to Keyshawn Vaughn to do as well as they did during those time periods?
Yeah. So, oh man, who were they? We had a whole bunch of offensive linemen go through that. So obviously, Andrew Jelks before he got injured, and then Barrett Gallagher at center. We had Bruno Reagan, we had Blake, we had
Wait,
The
you had
Lando.
Bruno and Blake at the same time?
Yeah.
How did you survive
Yep.
those two guys?
Yeah, I don't know. I still ask
They,
myself that.
and they've both been on the program, and I will say, and I hope Bruno sees this. Bruno and I went out to dinner a couple of years ago. I've never seen a human being consume as much sushi as he did, and that was when he was playing in the XFL at the time. It was we had a great dinner, but man, I loved my dinner. That was a fun night.
Yeah, so I think his class was like Bailey Grenier, Bruno,
Yeah.
Cole Harden, a few other guys. They would go to, I think it was Sushi Train. All that was their thing. So like ours was oh man, what is it called? It was on West End. It closed down.
Mhm.
Um, I can't think of it. It was like Golden Dragon or something like that. But
Casey, I
theirs
know you're watching. What's the name of that restaurant?
theirs was Sushi Train, and they would go up there, and I remember seeing photos of plates just stacked, and I was like, oh my goodness, like I couldn't do it.
Well, Bruno's tastes have improved. We went to the most expensive place in town, but it's also the highest quality sushi, that's for sure. He has a good eye. But and Bailey's been on the show as well, and I know he's doing some coaching. But as a lineman, what does it mean to you personally? And I don't mean that you're out looking for, look what we've done kind of a mentality outwardly. But inwardly, what does that mean to you guys to see the running backs set these records and do so well? How many yards is Keyshawn still running in that game against Baylor? The man must have had 800 yards in that game. But what does that mean for you as linemen and the pride you must take helping those guys do so well?
Yeah, I think as an offensive lineman, you always want to run the football, right? I think there's a saying about that. But there's no greater feeling on a football field than moving another grown man from point A to point B. So when you can kind of rewind and on a Friday night, you're going through your goals for the game as an offensive line, you say, hey, we want to rush for 300 yards.
Mhm.
We don't care who's carrying that football, but
Mhm.
as a collective group of 5 men, like here's
Mhm.
our goal. And when you go on the field, that's all you're set out to do.
Mhm.
And it happens. There's no greater feeling that one, you were able to set that goal and achieve it, but two, you did it with 5 people who have all different jobs and you came together to do one thing
Mhm.
and you end up rushing for 300 yards in a game. Like that is something, whatever that rushing goal was so pivotal and achieving that, yeah, winning is the number one goal. But two, for an offensive lineman, if you can rush for your goal,
Mhm.
whatever it is, yards total, yards per carry, whatever that is, that that gets you excited, especially when you get to move people around.
Casey says Las Palmas.
Las Palmas was the Mexican spot.
Mhm.
I can't remember the Chinese spot though. Doesn't
Um,
matter. We ate all of it.
Whenever I have a center on the show, they say that that's the toughest offensive line position, and they've got their list of reasons.
Yeah.
When I have a left tackle, same thing. But now I got a right tackle. Why is right tackle the toughest position on the line compared to the other?
I'll tell you right now, it's not. I started a game in the NFL at left tackle, left guard, center, right guard, right tackle.
Mhm.
Um, Mentally, center is the hardest offensive line position, I believe. Physically and like tactically,
Mhm.
it's left tackle. You're dealing with the premier pass rusher. You're on an island, right? You're known by the team as the one who can be on an island by yourself. So they're not going to slide to you. You're going
Mhm.
to be on the best defensive lineman because they trust you in doing that. So physically, I feel like that is the hardest position on the offensive line.
Mhm.
Center mentally, right tackle is not that. Honestly, it's not that hard. I enjoyed playing right tackle, but again, coming out of Vanderbilt, like if you want to get drafted, you're going to have to play left tackle.
Mhm.
And I was fortunate enough to do that.
Did you ever play with any left-handed quarterbacks, whether it was in high school, college, or pros?
Yeah, I did. Oh gosh, I couldn't remember their names.
Did we have
Eventually,
any at Vanderbilt
yes.
during your years?
I don't think it was Vanderbilt. Man, there
Maybe
was
somebody in the pros?
someone in the pros. I couldn't tell you who it was, but the answer is yes. I just forget who it was.
It'll come back to you, but my question is, were you the blindside tackle for that lefty quarterback, or did you flipped? Because I
No, no,
look,
we're
I've
not
never
doing.
played lineman, but I know that the technicalities of playing left tackle versus right tackle have got to be vastly different if you're the blindside tackle, so to speak.
Yeah, the National Football League, you're getting placed where they drafted you to play. Unlike Vanderbilt's offensive line now, where they switch left and right, that's not
Right.
happening. This is you go to one side and you stay there, no matter if the quarterback's left or right.
Well, I was going to say between Mitchell and Big Glow and them flipping, I never know where they're going to be. I know that's what you probably watch. I'm just watching Diego and where the ball goes, but you see the linemen switching often in our interior line play, and I know that they don't do that in the pros.
Yeah, I think. I mean, honestly, we might be the only team in the country that does that. I don't really know any other country or any other team that does that.
Whatever
But
Coach Beck is doing, let's keep doing
yeah,
it.
it worked. So we'll keep on keeping on, right?
That's right. That's right. It, well, before we get into the pros part of your story, I want to step away from football and talk about now. Remember, Casey's watching, and you're too young. The statute of limitations has not expired, so share what you want to share or not. But I want to talk about life away from football as a Vanderbilt undergrad. There probably wasn't a lot of time, but certainly found other things to do, other interests, other students maybe you hung out with. Can you share a little bit about that experience?
Yeah, and obviously I credit a lot of my off the field and on the field, but off the field experience at Vanderbilt to my wife. We met freshman move-in day and started dating, a month or two after. So it was quickly into the heart of it, and I had a full college experience, and that's hard to say, right? James Franklin, the first 2 years was very much all football. I remember waking up at 4:30, walking across campus to go drink some crazy protein shake by Galt, and doing that and just not having too much free time. But I still remember the training on and training off text messages that we would get on a Friday night after workouts were done for the day in the off season, or if we had just won a game, what Saturday night was like. And yeah, we all had a bar that we enjoyed to go to, enjoyed going to, and those were fun days. But then after the James Franklin to Derek Mason switch, I felt like I really got to step into that Vanderbilt student experience and joined a fraternity, Pi Kappa Alpha, with Blake Fromang and Colby Cook and a few other guys. Um, my wife was in a sorority, so we got to enjoy, the date parties, the formals, things like that, things that normal college students would get to do. And I felt like I always did a good job at not just surrounding myself with the guys in the locker room. A lot of people will go, and those will be the only guys they talk to for 4 or 5 years,
Mhm.
and it hurts them in the long run. And like I said, I credit a lot of this to Casey, because she kind of opened my eyes. I was like, there's so much more here that you can see in terms of like the people you can interact with, like the people who are coming to the school. It's a top school. These aren't dumb people. These are some of the smartest kids in the world. And there's so many doors that you could open up with relationships, genuine relationships and friendships. So, I mean, I got involved with the Vanderbilt programming board because of Casey. So, there was so much stuff that I did as a regular Vanderbilt student that I don't think I would have been able to do my first 2 years. And like I said earlier in the podcast,
Mhm.
I wouldn't change anything from year 1 to year 5, because I got that full experience, right? I won, I lost. I got to be a real student. I got to be a real athlete. There was a
Mhm.
great mix of everything.
I'm so glad to hear that about your experience because too many of us stay in that football bubble, the McGugan bubble. And maybe we're more comfortable when I say we, a lot of athletes, whether it's basketball, football, whatever sport, they're more comfortable around just the athletes, and they don't give themselves the opportunity to network, to be away from their sport because it's uncomfortable. But I'm glad to hear that you had much more rounded experience because a lot of those who do give that time away from their sport and just to be a regular student, I think it's a better experience. And I think it is not spoken about enough. And this kind of segues to the Ingram Center for Student Athlete Success that has just blossomed in the last few years that I think really encourages, regardless of your sport, but it encourages those student athletes to have the full experience. And I'm glad to hear that Casey and you were able to take advantage of a lot of that. All right, what is the bar that you may or may not have frequented still in existence and operating today?
It is as of now. I think there's plans for it to become a high rise, but it's still there. I haven't stepped foot in that place in probably five years or so. So it's still there though, and I'm finishing up my MBA at Vandy this May. So I might have to just let one go, one more time for old time's sake. So
Blake may or may not have just said, sure, you haven't been there in the last 5 or 6 years.
I really haven't. I really haven't. My wife and I, we don't go downtown unless we have to. And I
Oh,
think a
sure,
lot of people who
sure.
live here say that. When we have friends in town, we'll venture down there, but I just can't do it anymore. When you got two little ones waking up at 6:30 on a good day, you can't afford it.
So what you're saying is that being in training camp in the NFL is easier than man-to-man coverage with toddlers in the house right now while you're trying to get your MBA.
I'll just say it's a different ball game.
This man is admitting he would go to work to rest, and that's in the NFL. No, I'm teasing. I do want to talk a little bit, Will, before we get you out of here. That transition out of Vanderbilt from an athletic standpoint and into the NFL, you get drafted in 2017 to the Cardinals, fifth round. First of all, did you have an idea that you were going to the Cardinals in the fifth round, or did it come about as a little bit of a surprise?
It came about as a surprise. So 2017 was a what some would say a weak offensive line class. I think I was the seventh ranked offensive line, um, which is slated third or fourth round because it was such a bad year, right? Going into the draft, you need 2 first-round tackles, you need 3 in the second round if you're going to get picked at 3 or 4.
Mhm.
That didn't happen. So I knew I was going to go probably. I was hoping for Indianapolis had been reaching out to me, Denver Broncos had been reaching out to me. So I was hopeful, Carolina. One of the only teams I didn't talk to, I think I talked to 28 of the 32 NFL teams.
Mhm.
One of the teams that I did not talk to was the Arizona Cardinals. They called me. I had no idea. I was shocked.
Mhm.
Um, but changed my life. Gave me an opportunity to play in the NFL. So for that, super thankful. But we needed a whole nother episode on this podcast for that
And
conversation.
maybe we'll come back to that, but I just want to hit a few topics about the NFL life, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Talk about the difference in, and I assume you were slated for right tackle to begin with the Cardinals, but talk about that transition from SEC football to NFL caliber football. What was the difference for you? What was the biggest adjustment?
Yeah. So what I tell people all the time is the SEC is a great predictor of what it's like to play in the NFL. However, the difference is in the SEC, you're going to get a premier pass rusher once, every 2 or 3 games, maybe every 4 or 5 games.
Mhm.
Whereas in the NFL, you're going to get a premier pass rusher every single snap. And so for me, I don't know if I was mature enough, and this is just me being candid with you. I don't think I was mature enough to handle that mentality going into it. I thought, oh, I got drafted. I can definitely play in the NFL, in which I did for 6 years. But lots of ups and downs. Started, benched, fired, hired, IR, no IR. I just don't think I took it as serious as I should have earlier on. I didn't realize that until it was too late. But still, strung together 6 good years. So I can't be mad at that. But yeah, it's a different beast in terms of you are always on. You can never take a play off because these people are trying to feed their families. And you don't realize that until you have kids that this isn't a game anymore. These people are fighting for their families. I just realized that a little bit too late. I didn't have kids at the time. And Casey and we got married in 2019. So the first 2 years of my career, we just didn't really understand the gravity of the situation.
Did you ever did you live in apartments, or did you ever buy homes in any of these cities? What was it like? The what we don't ever see is the logistics of Casey probably having to pack up the house and time to move. I know that can be a little frustrating or a little stressful at times.
Yeah. So when you get released in the NFL, you don't have time to go pack up. So Casey did all of that for us. But we always rented. That's a common thing in the NFL, right? 97% of the NFL is going to rent. 3% are going to buy a home. And that's the reality of the situation. So we always rented. It was super easy to kind of get in and get out when we needed to. Because when the off season comes along, they don't reach out. The season ends, you just go home. There's no winter workouts or anything like that. Come back for OTAs, and you better be in shape.
During the off seasons, would you come back home to Clay or to Nashville, or where would you go for the off seasons?
I would train at Vanderbilt, which a lot of guys still do in the off season. I think, I don't know. I've been out for 2 years now, but when I was playing, a lot of us came back and we trained at Vandy. Um, but yeah, we were here in Nashville, right? Nashville's my home, and we bought a house here, and that's it was a lock and leave situation, right? We'd live here in the off season, lock it up, leave for the season, and come back. Um, but now that those days are over, my wife, we moved out to the west side of town, a little bit further out, built a house, and don't plan on doing any of that ever again.
From a mindset for 20 years, you've been part of a team sport. And that transition away from sports and the team concept sometimes is tough because not you, but a lot of players, whenever we stop playing, whether it's high school, college, pros, may not have the next phase of life planned out. Clearly, with you getting your MBA, that had to have been on your mind at the time you decided it was time to retire. But here's my question. That internal clock, when you know you need to be working out at a certain time of the year and be in a certain shape, how has that transition been the last two falls or the last 2 years for you?
Yeah. So for me, right, I came to Vanderbilt thinking I'd be a great college football player, get a great education, and go, work a real job. The NFL was the cherry on top. And like I said, I don't think I was mature enough to understand the gravity of the opportunity that was in front of me. Still strung 8 years or 6 years together. What could have been, right? You could always say that. But for me, I always knew that football was not everything to me. And, that could have hurt me. But I think for me, the writing was on the wall, right? These kids coming in and getting drafted were faster, stronger, and they just wanted it a little bit more than I wanted it towards the end of my career. And I remember coming into the New York Giants locker room, and I was like studying the GMAT, and I was like, yeah, this is definitely it for me. Like, I don't have any desire to come back and play football ever again. Um, and sometimes when right? And it was time for me to kind of focus on the next thing, focus on, my family, my next career, and my health. You see guys all the time in the NFL who don't have a plan. And I never wanted to be that guy. So I made it like my mission to figure out like what's the best path for me forward. And for me, I'm a lifelong learner. I love learning things that I don't know, right? And I just want to. My wife makes fun of me because she thinks I know the most random things in the world, and that's just how I'm wired. And I think it was important for me to make sure, all right, this MBA will give me an opportunity to learn stuff that I had never learned or never had the opportunity to learn before at Vanderbilt while I was a student athlete. let me focus on it now instead of focusing on just football or just, football and athletic or academics while at Vanderbilt. Like now I can just focus on academics. And it would open up so many doors for me outside of it, right? If I could, my big thing is if I can pair the NFL Shield with a company that means a lot in the business world, I think that would, just prove not only to myself, but to everyone that like, I'm not just a football player. I can put my mind to something and achieve it when other people outside of the football world said you'll never be able to do that. So that's kind of what led me to the NBA and then currently, or, post NBA where I'll be working at BCG. So that's
Well,
kind of my next path.
well, I was going to say, Will, you're the 1% of the 1%, or whatever. It may be even smaller than that because it's so few from high school play college, so few from college, even fewer get to play in the pros. And then to last for as many seasons as you did, when the average is probably less than half, probably 2 to 3 years, not six, just says that it's a tribute to your just what you're built of. But before I let you get out of here, I have two questions. And I always ask this. I know that you have a group text with some of your buddies from Vanderbilt. Can you tell us the name of the group text?
I don't think I do. I don't have a group text with guys that I played with. I have a group text of other Vanderbilt football players that had played there. Um, but what is the name of that? It's probably best I don't say it. It used to be the West Nasty Boat Club.
The West Nasty Boat Club.
Yeah, so
Love
a
it.
few guys. So Blake Sutherland, who's of 4 years older than I am, and then Mason Johnston. They both live in West Nashville now, and we're very close. Our kids all grow up together, and so not guys I actually played with, but
Sure. No, I
around
love
the
it.
same age.
I love hearing that because it really just sets a tone for probably the conversations. And here's the last question for you. What's your best trivia subject? If you were to play Wednesday night trivia at the local bar and restaurant, what's your topic?
Probably history. Yeah, probably history. Just random facts about history. Yeah,
That's why Casey keeps you around. She loves you some
yeah.
history.
I wish I had free time to go play trivia on a Thursday night, but
Well, between your MBA, two toddlers, your marriage, and everything else you got going on, I appreciate you making some time tonight, Will, for us to get together and learn a little bit about your journey.
yeah, it's been fun, and I'm a big Vanderbilt supporter, have been right since I stepped foot on campus. I think the sky's the limit for him. I'm happy for Coach Clark Lee. I texted him the other day, and just I really believe in what he's doing in the landscape of college football right now. It's hard to do it the right way. And if there's any Vandy fans out there on the fence, like you just got to believe in him because he's building it the right way, and he's not letting outside pressures kind of deter that.
I,
So
I
that's what I would
admire
say.
him. I admire him for the same thing. And we got some good news. Super senior Marlon Sewell, number 7, one of our captains, is coming back. And we just got news. I think we've signed or committed a Texas Tech offensive lineman who has a lot of experience and probably be slated to be one of the starters this year for Diego.
Yeah, that's
Those
awesome.
are
I'm
all good
excited.
news.
I actually Eli Sowers is in my private equity class. I guess he's getting a master's in finance. So they do a little crossover with the MBA program. So
Yeah.
he popped in there today. So I mean, I support these guys. I think they have the same belief that I had when I walked on campus. Obviously, the landscape has changed, but you know, I think they're trending in the right direction, and I think Clark Lee's doing an amazing job at keeping those guys grounded.
Well, Will, thank you for what you did back in the day on the field for us and off the field and what you're doing right now. Wish you the best. Hang on, let me sign off. But thank you again, Bud, for sharing some time with us tonight.
Yeah, hey Bernard, I appreciate you having on, and nice to meet you finally. I've been off social media for a year, so I'm back on it. So glad I could
Well,
hop on, and appreciate you.
guys, this is why we do these stories every week. We're telling the oral history of the football program, one conversation at a time. you guys anchor down.